You are being distracted. Right now, the global media is hypnotizing you with the blazing fires of the Persian Gulf. They are showing you burning oil tankers, shouting politicians, and the collapse of the Middle East. But while the masses stare at the sand, the true masters of the global chessboard are quietly locking down the oceans. Listen to me very carefully. The survival of the American empire will not be decided in the sands of the Levant or the deserts of Iran. It is being decided right now in the treacherous, contested waters of the Indo-Pacific. What has transpired in the last 24 hours is not just a military escalation. It is a tectonic geopolitical pivot. We are witnessing the weaponization of geography itself. If you think the global supply chain is bleeding now, you have seen absolutely nothing. Welcome back to the War Room. I am Jiang, and today we are going to decode the suicide moves, the gray zone warfare, and the terrifying naval deterrence that has just dragged the United States and China to the very precipice of a global systemic collapse. Let's look at the raw, unfiltered data from the last 24 hours. The United States and the Philippines have just triggered the largest joint military exercise in history, Balikatan 2026. We are looking at a massive mobilization of over 17,000 troops spread across the critical choke points of the northern island of Luzon, staring directly down the throat of the Taiwan Strait and the highly disputed South China Sea. But this is not your standard, routine flag-waving exercise. This is a coalition of the willing, pulling in forces from France, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. But here is the absolute game changer. Here is the move that just crossed the Rubicon: Japan. For the first time since the ashes of World War II, the Japanese self-defense forces are not just handing out bottled water in a humanitarian capacity. They have stepped onto foreign soil in an active combat role. Japan has deployed ground troops to the Philippines, and they are preparing to fire their Type 88 ground-to-surface anti-ship missiles to sink a simulated enemy vessel right on the edge of the South China Sea. Do you understand the magnitude of this? Tokyo has effectively unshackled its pacifist constitution. They are practicing how to sink the Chinese Navy, shoulder to shoulder with the Americans. And the Pentagon is not holding back. The U.S. Army's first multi-domain task force has deployed the M142 HIMARS, High Mobility Artillery Rocket Systems, to these remote Philippine islands. The strategy is called distributed lethality. They are turning the Philippine archipelago into a giant, unsinkable missile sponge, placing long-range precision fires right on China's maritime periphery to create a Pacific wall. But do you honestly believe Beijing is just sitting back and watching? While the Americans parade their rockets, the People's Liberation Army, PLA, is executing a masterclass in hybrid warfare. At the Second Thomas Shoal, a submerged reef where a handful of desperate Philippine Marines live on a rusting World War II-era ship, the BRP Sierra Madre, China has escalated its gray zone tactics to a terrifying new level. The Philippine National Security Council just released evidence accusing Chinese maritime militias of dumping massive quantities of deadly cyanide into the waters surrounding the shoal. Let me translate that for you. China is waging ecological and biological warfare to exterminate the local fish populations, completely cutting off the natural food supply of the Philippine troops. They are attempting to starve them out without firing a single conventional bullet. This is the epitome of gray zone warfare. Actions meticulously calculated to be devastating, yet hovering just millimeters below the threshold of an armed attack that would trigger the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty. And if that wasn't enough, the Chinese Navy has simultaneously flexed its conventional apocalyptic muscle. In direct response to a Japanese destroyer transiting the Taiwan Strait, the PLA Eastern Theater Command unleashed a massive warship formation into the Western Pacific. Furthermore, they have officially commissioned two brand new 10,000-ton Type 055 guided missile destroyers, the Dongguan and the Anqing. These are not mere patrol boats. These are floating fortresses, designed specifically to provide an impenetrable air defense umbrella and escort Chinese aircraft carriers deep into blue waters, challenging American dominance within the first island chain. Now, we must look beneath the surface. The mainstream media looks at the Balikatan exercises and sees a localized territorial dispute. They are entirely blind to the macroeconomic chessboard. What is actually happening here is a desperate struggle for strategic depth and energy leverage. To understand the South China Sea today, you must look at the Persian Gulf. Right now, the United States is entangled in a devastating proxy war with Iran. The Strait of Hormuz is practically paralyzed, choking off 20% of the world's daily oil and liquefied natural gas. The U.S. Navy has been forced to enact a naval blockade, a move that is bleeding the Pentagon dry financially and logistically. Washington is caught in a trap of its own making. Because America is losing its absolute grip on the Middle East energy corridor, it must forcefully secure the next vital artery, the Strait of Malacca. Look at this map. More than 60% of China's total maritime trade and a staggering 80% of its crude oil imports must pass through the narrow waters of the Malacca Strait. According to the theories of Alfred T. Mahan, whoever controls the sea lanes controls the world. The United States is actively transforming the Strait of Malacca and the South China Sea into a non-military weapon. By heavily arming the Philippines and integrating Japan into a unified combat architecture, Washington is building a loaded gun pointed directly at Beijing's economic jugular. The unspoken threat is crystal clear. If you continue to secretly fund and supply the Iranians in the Middle East, we will blockade your energy shipments in Malacca and the South China Sea. But the game is infinitely more complex. Enter Indonesia. In a move that sent absolute shockwaves through global financial capitals, Indonesia's finance minister, Purbaya Yudi Sadewa, casually floated a proposal at a geopolitical conference just hours ago. He suggested that Indonesia, controlling the lion's share of the Malacca Strait, should impose transit tolls on commercial shipping. He explicitly stated that Indonesia sits on a key global trade route and should monetize its position. Where do you think Jakarta got that idea? From Iran. Tehran has successfully weaponized the Strait of Hormuz, acting as a toll booth and proving that a determined regional actor can hold the global economy hostage. Even though the Indonesian government desperately tried to walk back the finance minister's comments, calling it a light-hearted tone, the psychological damage is permanently done. The mere suggestion that the Malacca Strait, a choke point accounting for a quarter of global maritime trade, could be subjected to sovereign toll extraction is an existential nightmare for global supply chains. This is the grim reality of the New World Order. Nations are realizing that geopolitical leverage is more valuable than international law. We are seeing a rapid acceleration of de-dollarization as countries seek to insulate themselves from these exact types of American and Western financial blockades. China is watching all of this unfold, calculating every single variable. Beijing knows that the U.S. cannot fight a two-front naval war. They know that every $1 billion America burns trying to intercept Iranian speedboats in the Persian Gulf is $1 billion not being spent on defending Taiwan or the Philippine Sea. So, how are the empires reacting to this terrifying convergence of crises? Let us break down the players. First, the United States of America. Washington is suffering from acute imperial overstretch. The U.S. is projecting strength with Balikatan, dropping HIMARS onto tropical beaches. But internally, the Pentagon is sweating. They have exhausted nearly half of their advanced interceptor missile stockpiles in the Middle East. They are forced to rely on a vulnerable tanker treadmill of commercial ships just to refuel their destroyers, because Iran blew up their port infrastructure. The U.S. is trying to act like the invincible hegemon, but the cracks in the armor are widening daily. By pushing Japan to take a combat role, America is admitting a hard truth. It no longer has the unilateral manpower or resources to contain China by itself. It needs meat shields. Second, the People's Republic of China. Beijing is playing a masterstroke of grand strategy. They are the ultimate beneficiaries of the Middle Eastern chaos. China is executing a strategy of maximum pressure with minimum direct conflict. By unleashing maritime militias to swarm reefs and allegedly poison the waters with cyanide, they forced the Philippines into a corner without giving the U.S. a legal justification to start World War III. Simultaneously, by sailing their Type 055 destroyers near Japanese islands, they are sending a chilling message to Tokyo. If you ally with the Americans, your home islands are within our strike range. China is bleeding the U.S. through 1,000 proxy cuts, waiting for the American political and economic will to collapse. Third, let us look at the silent winners, Russia and Iran. Moscow is reaping the rewards of skyrocketing global oil prices caused by the Hormuz blockade, using that financial windfall to fund its grinding war machine in Ukraine. Iran has successfully forced the U.S. into a humiliating asymmetric naval war, proving that speedboats and drones can neutralize multi-billion-dollar American aircraft carriers. Every day the U.S. is bogged down dealing with Tehran is a day China has a free hand in the Pacific. And finally, the European Union and Japan, the so-called allies. They are waking up to a terrifying new reality. In Europe, the EU is desperately holding summits in Cyprus, trying to figure out how to invoke their own mutual defense clause, Article 42.7, because they know they can no longer rely on NATO or an erratic U.S. administration. And Japan? Tokyo's decision to fire missiles in the Philippines is born out of pure existential dread. It is driven by Trump jitters, the profound fear that if a true war breaks out over Taiwan, the U.S. might simply refuse to show up. Japan is militarizing at a breakneck pace because they realize they are standing alone on the edge of the abyss. Here is my bold, uncompromising prediction for the next 24 to 48 hours. The chessboard is primed, and the pieces are loaded. You will see Beijing execute a sudden, massive, and unannounced live-fire blockade drill in the Western Pacific. They will not target the Philippines directly. Instead, they will draw a perimeter dangerously close to where the U.S. has just deployed its HIMARS units, and where the Japanese forces are operating in Luzon. This will not just be a naval exercise, it will be an electronic warfare blackout. China will systematically jam communications and radar systems in the Philippine Sea to test the reaction time of the U.S. multi-domain task force. Simultaneously, watch Indonesia very closely. Despite walking back the Malacca Strait toll proposal, a seed has been planted. Within the next 48 hours, expect a sudden surge in unforeseen maritime safety inspections conducted by Indonesian authorities in the strait. It will be framed as environmental protection or counter-smuggling, but the true objective will be to subtly slow down commercial traffic, reminding Washington, Beijing, and the entire world exactly who holds the keys to the Asian energy corridor. The era of peaceful, uninterrupted global trade is officially dead. We have entered the age of maritime hostage-taking. The world is being partitioned right in front of your eyes. The great powers are no longer fighting for ideology. They are fighting for the physical choke points of human survival. Who do you think holds the winning hand in this geopolitical deathmatch? Is the U.S. distributed lethality strategy enough to keep China locked inside the first island chain? Or has Beijing already won the war by leveraging proxy chaos in the Middle East to bankrupt the American empire? I want to hear your strategic analysis. Drop your assessment in the comments below. Debate the chessboard. If you want to survive the coming geopolitical storm, you need to see the world not as you wish it to be, but exactly as it is. Ruthless, calculated, and unforgiving. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because when the next flashpoint erupts, and it will, we will be the first ones dissecting the fallout in the war room. Until next time, keep your eyes on the shadows.